Saudi Arabia and Russia have been rivals for decades and on opposite sides on many issues. But the Saudi king's historic visit suggests a new relationship. Why now, and what does it mean for the Middle East? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem, Sika. It is the first visit by a Saudi king to Russia and a recognition of new realities and shifting sands in the Middle East. King Salman and President Vladimir Putin have a number of issues at stake, from the war in Syria to the global price of oil. Investment deals worth billions of dollars have also been signed. Some argue the visit reflects the growing Russian influence in the Middle East. They've agreed on the importance of fighting terror, but it's not clear what that means when it comes to events on the ground. Here's what their foreign ministers had to say.
It's obvious that the fight against terrorism means that we have to fight extremist ideologies which are well known to our Saudi friends. We hope very much that our contribution to these efforts will lead to good contribution by Russia to peace and stability in the Islamic world, and also to good work on the Islamic Council.
As far as Syria is concerned, we're certainly cooperating closely with Russia in terms of the opposition and the scheduled rounds of talks in Geneva. And of course, we fully support the talks in Astana and the need to make sure we preserve territorial integrity and sovereignty.
So what are the key issues for the two countries? Well, they've been backing opposite sides in Syria's war. Saudi Arabia supporting rebels fighting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces, while Russia and Iran have sided with Assad. It's that connection, Russia and Iran, that worries the Saudis. King Salman has told President Putin Iran must stop interfering in Middle East politics. The two men also signed deals worth billions of dollars on military hardware, including anti-aircraft and anti-tank missile systems. And the two largest oil producers will further coordinate their effort to stabilize crude prices. So let's bring in our guest now. Here in Doha, we have Ibrahim Fraihat. He is an associate professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Joining us from Moscow, Nikolay Surkov, a foreign policy analyst at the Russian International Affairs Council. And in Delaware in the US via Skype, Lawrence Korb, a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense. Good to have you all with us. So, Nikolay Surkov, let me start with you then. How significant is this visit for Russia? Is it a recognition of their place now in the Middle East?
Well, you've described the situation correctly. It is a breakthrough, and it's a recognition by at least by the Saudis, of the new Russian role in the region. So it's a very important step, because now Russia will be treated as an equal partner and an important player in the region. So that was the case. And besides, we have very interesting deals, very important deals in economy and arms trade. So all things are very important, but I think the most important issue will be, of course, mutual understanding about Syria, because without Saudi help, it won't be easy to, or it won't be even possible to reach a political solution, which is certainly necessary.
Lawrence Korb, how is the U.S. going to be looking at this, given the state of relations between Russia and the U.S. right now? Are they going to be happy about the prospect, or about the fact that Saudi Arabia, the Saudi king, ally of the U.S. for so many years, is on a visit to Moscow?
Well, the U.S. is obviously not happy because, for one thing, the Saudis are helping the Russian economy by buying all of those arms. It also recognizes the fact that Russia has been supporting Assad, who the U.S. may remember President Obama said, you know, Assad must go. Also, Russia is also selling arms to Iran and working with Iran in Syria, and that also goes against the U.S. interests. And finally, the two of them working to keep up oil prices that hurts the world economy and the U.S. economy.
Ibrahim, how do you see this then? Is this an acknowledgement not just of Russia's growing influence in the Middle East, but with regard to events in Syria, the reality that Saudi Arabia is going to have to perhaps concede that Bashar al-Assad will remain in power for the foreseeable future?
Well, it's rare to find the three guests in Inside the Story are all on the same page. But this time it happens. I think we're all on the same page. We're all agreeing that this is a recognition of the new Russian role in the Middle East. And I think this happens for two major reasons. One is that Russia has emerged as the conflict resolver of the Middle East conflicts, especially given the credits that it received after managing or successfully managing so far to its own interest the conflict in Syria after Geneva failed and Astana, led by Russia, is making progress. And the other major reason, actually, Russia built credibility in the region that it's able and willing and supports its allies, even autocratic allies in these countries all the way to the end, no matter how much the price is going to be. Like, as again, the lessons drawn from Syria, Russia goes all the way in supporting autocratic regimes. And this is especially important to link it to the current visit of King Salman, is that we have to keep in mind that the preparations for succession in Saudi Arabia is happening, and King Salman is searching for support of power transition to his son after actually not the very good lessons drawn from the Yemen war and the Gulf crisis. So for Russia is to be addressed at this particular stage. I think this adds more support to the succession that Saudi Arabia is preparing, and that's what also contributed to the motivation of this trip.
Can we also see this perhaps as Saudi Arabia trying to hedge its bets, just kind of diversify its international partnerships? Because it's no secret that they've not been happy with, I mean, you mentioned the Gulf crisis, they've not been happy with the Trump administration's position on this. I say Trump administration, not President Trump himself. And perhaps this is a way, by getting closer to Russia, this is a way of kind of hedging their bets.
Well, that's definitely the case, and especially is that Saudi Arabia has been very frustrated of the U.S. administration's position on Middle East conflicts for 8 years during the Obama administration, and finally after the Obama administration was replaced with the Trump administration, they thought that things changed, and that's why we saw the Riyadh summit and the Trump supporting of a Saudi leadership in the region. And when the Gulf crisis happened, Saudi Arabia was very frustrated again that did not receive the support that it was expecting to receive from Washington, D.C., where the split in the American position between the establishment and the Trump office, this actually weakened the Saudi position, not strengthened the position in the Gulf crisis. And that's, again, Russia, given these circumstances, emerged as the party that goes all the way in supporting their allies and their autocratic regimes in the region, and that contributed to the frustration of the relationship with the U.S.
Lawrence Korb, what about the optics of all of this? You see the Saudi king traveling to Moscow for the first time, just months after President Trump flew to Riyadh earlier this year, of course, and lavished praise on his Saudi hosts.
Well, I think President Trump has to recognize what Sir Harold Nicholson said at the Versailles Conference at the end of World War I. Nations don't have permanent friends or enemies. They have permanent interests. And so obviously, a lot of countries have been traveling to Russia, including Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu was there. The Egyptians have been there. So a lot of countries are going to Russia. So the United States is not happy with this, particularly, as you mentioned, after President Trump went to Riyadh and lavished praise on the Saudis and announced that the Saudis were buying a lot of American arms as well. So they're not happy about it, but there's really not much they can do with it, given the complexity of the situation where, for example, we're on the same side of Russia in fighting ISIS, but different than, dealing with Assad. We're on the same side with Russia with the Iranian arms deal. The Saudis are not happy with that. And as my colleague from Doha just mentioned, when it came to the GCC split, you had President Trump saying one thing, Secretary Tillerson and Secretary Mattis saying something else because they're concerned about the base in Doha. So I think what this says, it's a very complex world. It's not like the Cold War where you had everybody on one side and everybody on another, and we're just going to have to sort these things out.
Nikolay Surkov, it's been suggested as well that Saudi Arabia on this visit would have been trying to get Russia to rein in Iran's influence in the Middle East because of the fact that you have Russia and Iran fighting on the same side in Syria. But are they overstating Russia's ability to do that?
Well, first of all, the Saudis are clearly concerned with Russia's arms sales to Iran. And that's why I think they will definitely want to establish a better understanding between two countries. So when we heard about this visit, it looked like an attempt to lure lure Russia from the Iranian camp to the Saudi camp. But actually Russia is trying to be as neutral as possible. Russia is following not only political but also economic interests, and Russia is trying to diversify. Actually, the best option for Russia is to work with both sides, with the Iranians and with the Saudis, probably even to act as a mediator in certain spheres. But generally, there are now several areas for cooperation between the Russians and the Saudis. It's not only Syria. The Saudis are also satisfied with Russia's position towards Yemen. Clearly, there might be cooperation in Libya. And of course, both countries are supporting Egypt, the current government of Egypt. So there is not only Iran. Iran is also on the agenda, but the agenda is much broader than that.
Ibrahim Fraihat, if I could turn back to you.
Speaking about the crisis, yes, I also wanted to mention the crisis in the GCC. Russia has actually taken a very neutral stance towards this crisis in the GCC. It supported neither of the parties. It is being treated as an exclusively domestic from the GCC point of view matter, and we're neutral. And this also very good. This is a satisfactory position from the point of view of Riyadh. So in many cases, we are actually partnering now.
Let's put that to Ibrahim then. What role can Russia play in resolving the GCC crisis? Can they be seen as an honest broker, first of all?
Well, Lavrov paid 2 visits to the Gulf in the past 3 months. Actually, one to Saudi Arabia and one to Qatar, and has made very clear position. It's taking a neutral position over the crisis. I don't think that Russia can be a direct mediator in this crisis. I think we have a good mediator in place, that's Kuwait, who brings legitimacy of mediation as a founder or one of the founders of the GCC and part of the GCC here. But legitimacy only does not solve a problem. It needs power, because it's easy for Russia and it's easy for the parties, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others, to say no to Kuwait, but it's not easy for them to say no to Russia or to the United States. So what can Russia do given these circumstances? I think can provide power, add to the legitimacy that Kuwait brings. I think with the combination of power and legitimacy, it can be an influence or an impact can be made here, especially that the U.S., again, division on the position of their position on the crisis has weakened the mediation. So this is something that Russia can do, of strongly supporting the dialogue and the solution in the Gulf crisis. And I think this is something, especially that the U.S. is unable to do, that Russia can contribute significantly here.
Lawrence Korb, what role does this visit play, if any, in resolving the current GCC crisis?
Well, again, I don't think it has very much to do with it at all, because, as it's just been pointed out, the Russians have been neutral. The United States has taken a very confused position. I think, as my colleague just mentioned, it's going to have to be countries like Kuwait, for example, who are going to mediate this. And remember, as you all know, this is not the first time this has happened. So hopefully this will end, because right now nobody is winning here. And the longer that this goes on, the more difficult it's going to be to confront the real challenges, like, for example, dealing with ISIS, coming to some sort of agreement on ending the Syrian civil war, the whole question of Kurdish independence, which has come up given the vote, given the fact that Turkey also is involved. They're buying weapons from Moscow right now, but they are siding with against the Saudis. So the longer this goes on, I think the more difficult it's going to be to establish some sort of stability in the region.
Yeah, Nikolay Surkov, what's your view on that? Could this be a basis for eventually coming to some sort of settlement on the conflict in Syria? That Russia and Saudi are seeing eye to eye more on this?
Yes, I think it will guarantee a progress in the near future. Firstly, because the Saudis are clearly supporting the Astana process, which can bring a ceasefire, and then we will have more fruitful negotiations in Geneva, because the Saudis are supporting Geneva I agreement, and they are supporting the UN Security Council resolution, which is the basis for the whole settlement process. And besides, which is even more important, the Saudis are now working on sending to Geneva a unified delegation of the Syrian opposition. As you probably remember, the opposition was very often split, and there was no chance to make a deal. So the Saudis are clearly pushing for the opposition to form a unified delegation, and which is more important, I think, the Saudis might support Russia's position that Assad should stay for a while, at least for the transition period, because, well, from the Russian point of view, there is no replacement for Bashar al-Assad right now. If he resigns, then the whole state might collapse, and this is very dangerous. Even despite the fact that the ISIS is clearly weakened by the recent events, still there is this danger. So I think cooperation between Russia and Saudi Arabia may actually bring a really significant progress in Geneva, and this is very important. That will bring us a political framework for the settlement.
Ibrahim, what's your view on that? If there is a recognition inside the Saudi leadership that Assad, for better or for worse, is here to stay in Syria, what influence could they have on the groups that they're supporting on the ground against Bashar al-Assad?
I think this trip will have. This trip has four major points that is expected to. The King Salman is expected to make progress. Number one is Syria. Two will succeed. Two unlikely to succeed. The two ones that will succeed, Syria. I think the two positions between Saudi Arabia and Russia has never been closer on Syria, and I think they both need each other in Syria. Russia needs Saudi Arabia in Syria because needs an Arab coverage for its political solution in Syria. And Saudi Arabia needs Russia in order to push for their allies to be closer, to be in the future arrangements in Syria. And I think they're also going to make progress on business relations between the two countries. This is likely. It's unlikely that trip will succeed or make significant progress on Iran, because I don't think Russia is willing to abandon Iran or to make significant changes in its position. And the other one, I think the Gulf crisis. I don't think Russia is also willing, at least for now, to change its neutral position on the Gulf crisis. So I don't think progress will be made on these two files.
Lawrence Korb, what's your view on this? Areas where they can find common ground, but others where there's differences remain?
There's no doubt about the fact that they can find common ground on Syria, because I think even Russia wants to stop, spending a lot of money there. They're worried about potential flashpoints like the killing of the Russian lieutenant general, supposedly by American-backed Syrian Democratic forces, and that, as my colleague in Moscow said, there's no one to take Assad's place, at least in the short term. So yes, they can work there, but other areas going to be very, very, very difficult to work for, other than keeping the oil prices up by Russia working with OPEC. So those are two areas they can work on. Others are going to be very, very difficult, particularly in dealing with Iran. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens now if President Trump should decertify the Iranian deal this week, how that plays out in the region.
Yeah, how do you think that's going to play out then, Nikolay Surkov?
If you mean, if your question about is about the Iranian deal, I think that Russia will do its best to keep this deal going, because it was worked. From the Russian point of view, it's the best solution for the current crisis. Otherwise, there will be only new set of sanctions and further arms race and growth of tension in the region, in the Gulf region, which is dangerous for all the parties. So we are actually doing our best to avoid this kind of development.
One of the things we mentioned at the top, Ibrahim Fraihat, was these are two of the biggest oil producers in the world, and they both agreed earlier this year on trying to stabilize oil prices. How important is that for both of them, given that they are a huge part of their economies?
Well, this is very important, and many analysts actually linked the visit to the stabilizing of oil prices. However, I'm not sure actually this was at the core of the issue, because actually this issue was sorted out much before this trip happened, and Russia and Saudi Arabia were able to reach an agreement, and they both maintained it, and they both are working together in stabilizing oil prices. I think what will happen is that, based on that success, I think they will add more. I expect that will be more business relations, whether it's in oil or other oil collaboration or other areas, will come out of this trip. And I think Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, will be with that also sending a message to Washington, D.C. Is that there is an alternative if the U.S. doesn't support the way it's expected to support Saudi positions. And I think for that reason, Saudi Arabia will be very careful to make progress on the business relations as well.
Yeah, Lawrence Korb, if there is a not so subtle message here being sent to Washington, how should the U.S. respond to this going forward?
Well, there's no doubt about the fact that the Saudis are sending a message to Washington, as we discussed before, given the stand of some of the Trump people on the whole GCC question. The Saudis never did like the Iranian deal. So the question becomes then what happens? And I think this is going to be a key week, because if President Trump should decertify the deal, then obviously the Saudis would like that. They did not like the deal in the first place. I don't think a lot of other countries in the region would like it. The United States would like to, get out of Syria. They just wanted to fight ISIS. President Trump, as he said, did not want to get involved in nation building. And then, of course, we have the whole question of Yemen, which, basically it's the Iranians and the Saudis, with U.S. help to the Saudis contending over what's going to happen there. So I think this is just one step in a very, very complex process that's going to go on for quite a while, where you're going to see both sides maneuvering for their own best advantage.
All right, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all three of you, Lawrence Korb, Nikolay Surkov, and Ibrahim Fraihat. Thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And thank you, as always, for watching. Remember, you can see this program anytime by visiting our website at Jazeera.com. And for further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hazem, Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.